It's the amazing Rico Brogna podcast with your host, Evan Roberts.
That's me. I'm Evan Roberts. Welcome into another brand new edition of Rico Brogna. And we're going to do you a big favor on today's Rico Brogna. We are going to take a little bit of a hiatus from trade rumors, from free agent speculation. We're actually going to talk about change that could help our favorite sport, Major League Baseball. Obviously, baseball has gone through many changes over the last couple of years, some of which I love, some of which I don't love. I'm sure you feel the same way. So as we sit here getting ready for the start of a brand new season, I figured why not have a nice, sane, rational conversation about the future of the sport and changes we would like to see occur. So the pitch clock to me is not a radical change. We argued about this on the Rico 2 years ago, and I have always been a proponent of some kind of pitch clock, not because it radically changes baseball, but because it brings baseball back to what it used to be. And that's why I would argue with anybody 2 years removed now from the pitch clock that I don't think that was a radical change. Putting a guy on second base in extra innings, radical change. There's no question. Designated hitter in the National League, radical change. And we could argue about those. But I never viewed the pitch clock as anything radical. I viewed it as something to kind of bring baseball back to where it used to be. So you'll notice with my ideas on changes for baseball, they're not that radical. Now, maybe you have some radical ideas, and we'll certainly hear from the people at the ricob@gmail.com. But my ideas mostly follow that same script, which is they may sound radical on the surface, but they're being imposed to bring baseball back to maybe a time that we miss. Now, not everything about baseball 50 years ago is better than it is today, or 20 years ago is better than it is today, but there are certain things. So I want to start, to me, with the biggest issue Major League Baseball has, and that is starting pitching has been devalued. So I do not begrudge Brian Kenny, who kind of coined the phrase bullpenning many years ago, and I don't begrudge Kevin Cash or any other manager that has deployed bullpenning, because the reality is your job is to win. Your job is not to make the sport aesthetically pleasing. Your job is not to make fans necessarily happy with, it's a starting pitcher who goes 6 or 7 innings. Your job is to win. You know, I've always defended the maintenance day in the NBA kind of under the same reasoning. Like, your job is to win a championship. If you believe resting players gives you the best chance to win a championship, then I'm not against it. So I don't begrudge Dave Roberts or Kevin Cash or any other manager that's used the bullpenning strategy. The way I look at things, it's kind of the way I'd run a government, is I don't want to impose laws that say you can't do it. I want to incentivize you not to do it. So let's tackle this issue. And I think we should start off by, I guess, mostly agreeing that in an ideal world, we would have starting pitchers matter again. That we would have starting pitchers go deeper into games, that we would have starting pitchers be the event that it used to be. And it's not that long ago. I'm not going 50 years ago. I'm not telling you Bob Gibson. How about Randy Johnson? How about Roger Clemens? All right, that's too long ago. How about Clayton Kershaw? How about Max Scherzer in his prime? Justin Verlander in his prime? Like, there was a time, wasn't that long ago, where we had a lot of aces in this sport, and aces would go deeper into games. Granted, it wasn't the 60s. It wasn't even the 80s, but it was an event. So I've asked myself this: how do we tackle that? Now, credit to Rob Manfred. When everybody was freaking out about the golden at-bat, remember that Fugazi controversy? Because Rob Manfred said on a podcast, one idea that would be kind of cool is the golden at-bat, where you could put any hitter up whenever you want. Remember that whole thing? If you listen to that podcast, and I think I exposed it here on the Rico, or maybe I did it on Evan and Tiki, he admitted that the biggest issue or the biggest thing he wants to tackle is what I'm talking about right now, which is how do you incentivize and how do you get starting pitchers to go deeper into games? So there's a lot of layers here. Obviously, this is a process that's going to take a long time, because right now you've got pitchers that are trained to throw max velocity and max spin rate as frequently as they can. And if that means you're only getting 3 or 4 innings out of them, managers are saying that's totally fine. Just give us 3 or 4 innings, throwing 99 miles per hour, getting as much spin on your slider, and that's okay. Just get as many outs as you can, and then we'll go to another bullpen arm. Now, one thing that's allowed that in a small way, let's be honest, is the designated hitter. Now, why do I say that? I say that because there was a time where in 2017, you want to get innings out of your starting pitcher because you don't want to have to go deep into your bench and use 150 different pinch hitters. You don't have to worry about double switching and taking guys out of the game. It's a small thing, but it matters. I know this as a fan, as a National League fan, that over the last 3 years, I have viewed when to take a pitcher out of a game a little bit differently, knowing I don't have to worry about their at-bat. So if anything, there's been a rule that has almost de-incentivized a starting pitcher going deeper into a game. So the idea of somehow rewarding a team for a starter going deeper into a game is intriguing. So there's a few ideas. Let's talk about it. We got the double hook. Now, the double hook is an extreme idea in which you have the designated hitter in both leagues, but as soon as a starting pitcher comes out of the game, you lose the DH. Now, to combat anybody whose first response is going to be Shohei Ohtani, you're telling me Ohtani has to come out of a game? Not really. Or Giancarlo Stanton. You could have a strategy. If you're Aaron Boone, for example, you always have that option to move your designated hitter to a position. And so, yeah, you're still taking someone out of the game, but maybe in the Yankees case, the guy you're taking out of the game is Jason Dominguez. Or maybe in the Mets case, the guy you're taking out of the game because you're trailing by a few runs, so you're going to put more of a premium on offense than defense, is Jose Siri or Tyrone Taylor. Like, imagine a world in which Starling Marte is the DH, and he's hitting. He's really effective. And starting pitcher comes out of the game. Now you've got to lose the DH. It doesn't mean you're losing the actual DH because that DH can move to a position. Now, there are a few guys that don't play positions. We saw that last year with JD Martinez. Them's the breaks. And by the way, there aren't as many guys who do that anymore. Like, we're not living in the David Ortiz, Edgar Martinez world. A lot of the guys that DH can also play the field, even if it is for an inning or two. And that's all you're talking about. You're talking about the last few innings of a game. So that's the appeal of the double hook. What I'm open to, though, is saying as long as you go a certain amount of innings, you want to start with 5, and maybe a few years from now it moves up to 6. Okay, fine. As long as your starter can go 5 innings, you will not lose the DH late in the game. And so here's what that does. A couple of things. It kills the bullpen game. It's dead. Because if you're Dave Roberts and your strategy from the get-go is a bullpen game, right? Like Ryan Brazier, who actually just got traded to the Cubs, but Ryan Brazier, who bullpenned a few of these games, starts, he's not going 5 innings. You can rule that out immediately. So once you announce that you're using a bullpen arm to start the game, you're confirming to the world you're losing the DH in the second or third inning. Are you doing that? The answer is probably not. So whether you like this idea or not, let's just admit it has killed the bullpen game. The bullpen game is gone. So this is an extreme idea, I admit, involving the DH and really using the DH as a weapon, but it's a way to incentivize. Like, one idea I do not like is the idea that you have to pitch a certain amount of innings. These rules don't say you have to pitch a certain amount of innings. These rules are incentivizing you to pitch a certain amount of innings. And that's far different. Like, there was a rumor or an idea, which Rob Manfred has shot down, so we don't have to worry about it, that was floated where it's mandatory to pitch 5 innings. That's ridiculous. I would never support something like that. You can't force a team or a pitcher to pitch a certain amount of innings. You incentivize it. So I'm intrigued by the double hook, and this is not my sneaky way of trying to bring back the pitcher hitting. And I do like the idea of attaching in a number of innings that you pitch that exempt you from this, like I said. So it's not if a starter goes 7, you take him out of the game, you lose the DH in the 8th inning. I wouldn't even go that far. I would say as long as a starter goes 5, and I would start off with 5. I would. I think 6 is asking too much, because look around baseball. How many guys go 6 innings? And I think that you also want to allow teams to realize, okay, these are the rules. Maybe when we're developing a young starter, we're going to develop them a little bit differently, because we know going deeper into a game matters. We know that going deeper into a game is now incentivized. And so when you're strategizing, hey, I could get max velocity and max spin. Yeah, but it probably means I'm only getting 3-4 innings out of that starting pitcher. You're realizing, yeah, not worth it. I'll do that with my relievers. I can't do that with a starting pitcher. And what that does, as extreme as it is, and I get it, there are a lot of people listening saying, you're an extremist, Evan. What's wrong with you? These rules are crazy. Think about the point of these rules. They're just to bring baseball back, just a little bit further back to where it was 15, 20 years ago. That's all you're doing. The pitch clock's very similar. The pitch clock sounds extreme because it's a clock, but what's the point of it? What are the results of it? The results of it are the games move faster. And for anyone who's a little bit older in our audience, you know that in 1985, you didn't need 30 seconds between pitches. That's Nomar Garcia Parra's fault. You know what I mean? Like, that wasn't happening in 1985. Wasn't happening in 1975. So the rule, as extreme as it sounds, is to bring the game back. I view the double hook the same way. It's just a way to bring it back. One other idea, and I think this is what Rob Manfred's going to do before he goes extreme, is change the way rosters are allotted. So we're going to talk a lot about this throughout spring training as we project the Met roster, but there are roster rules, and I think most of us know what they are. There's 26-man rosters, but you cannot carry more than 13 pitchers. Not allowed, okay? Can't go 14-12. Can't have 14 pitchers and 12 position players. There are now rules where it's 13 and 13. So if you're the Mets and you have a 6-man rotation, that means the bullpen arms are 7. It's simple math. One thing Rob Manfred has floated doing, and let's analyze this, is changing that. And let's say all of a sudden Rob Manfred announces, okay, 26-man rosters, 12 is the max amount of pitchers. Or dare I say 11. Maybe we go more extreme. If you do that and you're a manager with less arms to use out of your bullpen, does that force you, also incentivize you, but force you to ask your starters to go deeper into games, because it is not a sustainable strategy to have your bullpen and go 5-6 bullpen deep when maybe you're only allowed to have 6 bullpen arms in your bullpen at a time. Now, my issue with this, because I'm not against it. Like, if it works, great. I mean, all I'm asking for, which I think a lot of us are, is how do we get starters to go deeper into games? If that works, is that better than a double hook? Sure. I mean, because there's less rules to get the same result. What I'm skeptical about with that is how general managers and managers will manipulate those rules. They will manipulate them by finding a way to send guys down, call guys up, put guys on the IL. And I know baseball is going to try to stop that. Baseball is going to try to stop that by saying, hey, you can only make a certain amount of transactions per week. They may incentivize it by saying, hey, we're looking into fake IL stints, so we don't want you manipulating things. But I still think there's a way that it's not going to get the desired result. Now, I'm willing to try it. I think that may be step number 1, to change the roster allotment. What I also like about that is now you've got more position players on your bench, which I kind of miss. Like, growing up, there were 6 position players on your bench. Now we're down to 4. And it does give you more wiggle room, especially if you have platoons going. The Mets are I think, going to be a platoon team. I think the Mets are going to have 2 or 3 platoons going into the start of the season. Center field's a platoon, even if it's not a straight lefty-righty move. You've got 2 guys playing center field. DH is going to be a platoon. So I kind of like having more position players, but I don't know if you're going to get the desired result, because I think what it will turn into is more manipulation when it comes to your roster. But you're trying to get the same desired result, which is starting pitchers going deeper into games. So I think the double hook is that kind of extreme way to go, but I also think it would add some really cool strategy to the game. You know, if you need to go 5 to keep the DH, and then your DH is one of your prominent players, like a Shohei Ohtani, even like a Giancarlo Stanton, that guy needs to play the field for a few innings. Otherwise, you're going to lose him for the rest of the game. It also builds in the strategy of, do I push my starter deeper just so I don't lose this? Or do I say, you know what, I'm prioritizing these 3 outs I need to get. Screw it, I'll lose my DH. I think there's a lot of strategy to it, and I think you'll get the desired result.
I love it because I do love the value. I love the value of a starting pitcher. Like, I think he's completely lost his value. Starting pitchers have lost their value. Unless you're like the top 10 pitchers in the league, you're really not doing anything. You're going 3-4 innings, but we're worried about pitch counts. So in order for you, like what you're saying is, in order for things to change, and I think that every starting pitcher can go 5 innings deep, can go 6 innings deep, can go deeper in games. You just have to adjust. The same way they've adjusted to a pitch count, you adjust to, hey, these are the new rules in place. If you're going to get a short hook, somebody else is gone, and we don't want to do that. So I think it's a great idea. I do love it.
Thank you. Now, in relation to this is a more minor thing, but this is a very Evan thing, I admit. This is a very geeky thing. The other rule change I want is we need to put the win, the stat, the wins into the hands of the official scorer once and for all. There is no more a world in which you didn't pitch 5, you can't get a win, or you blew a save, but then your team happened to score 3 runs in the bottom of the 9th inning, you get a win. The win should be a decision. The win should be decided by the official score. There are a lot of baseball fans, really the older baseball fan, and maybe even some my age. I've always hated the win. It's funny. One of my first lessons in baseball was in the early 90s. And, I got Baseball Weekly, and I'd look at the newspaper, and I'd look at the stats, and I was very confused. I would ask my dad, I forget the year Jack McDowell won the Cy Young, but I said, who's going to win the Cy Young, Dad? And he said, Jack McDowell is. And I looked at his ERA, and I was like, his ERA is not even that far off from Anthony Young, who's got this record losing streak. How's Jack McDowell winning the Cy Young? And my dad said, well, he's got a lot of wins. And I'm trying to remember who the pitcher was. There was somebody. Oh, Steve Ontiveros. Steve Ontiveros was a pitcher, I think, on Oakland at the time, or Anaheim. And he had a lower ERA. And I'm like, he's better. He has a lower ERA. Why the hell do we care about wins? Just because you're on a really good team that scores a lot of runs? Just because you got a really good bullpen that doesn't blow leads? So I was a win skeptic since I was 8 years old. So I'm not new to this, but I've never been a fan of the stat of wins. Now, a lot of people are. I mean, my longtime midday partner, Joe B, was a huge fan of wins. I think my dad looked at wins for many, many years. But obviously that stat has started to die. And I think most of us look at it and say, there's no fair way to judge. But my grandfather, who's no longer with us, used to, and this was long before we ever argued about wins, used to tell me that the official scorer should decide the win. Because in his opinion, it was unfair for a starter to go 8 scoreless innings, leave a game up 1-0, have the closer blow the lead, and then vulture the win. And he's like, that's ridiculous. He shouldn't get the win. The official score should just give it to the guy who pitched the 8 scoreless innings. So I think it'll help the win stat. I'm not saying it's going to bring it back to its real prominence, but it would make the win stat matter. And here's the other thing that I love, and I think some of us would love it. Then we get to debate it. After a game, Mets win a ball game, we're all having fun. You're at the bar. You may actually say, can you believe they gave the win to blah, blah, blah? The win should have gone to blah. And all of a sudden, we have a new baseball debate. So I think that is a no-brainer. I think that also the sport has changed enough where starters don't go 5 innings. I know this goes back to point number 1, where we're trying to get starters to go 5 innings, but they don't. So we have a stat that says you can't get a win if you don't go 5. So you're telling me a starter can go 4 scoreless, come out of the game, then you could use 9 different relievers, and the guy who went to 4 scoreless is not allowed to get the win, but the guy who came in and got 2 outs can? Like, that's ridiculous. So hand the decision to the official scorer.
So the one issue I have is, first of all, why do we have to give a win or loss to an individual player? That's my first question to you.
Why? Because I mean,
seriously,
why? Like, it's just because there's a win and a loss after each game. I don't know.
Yeah, but in basketball, there's no winner or loser. Like the team gets the L, but the individual player doesn't get the L.
I think it's more just because that's the way it's always been with pitchers. And as much as we've kind of deleted the stat, like the stat hasn't been deleted, but we don't care about it as much. It's just always been there. I hate to give that answer, but that's pretty much the answer.
So for that being said, though, why does it have to go to a pitcher? Why doesn't a win go to a, say, for example, if the game-winning hit, a walk-off hit is delivered by, Mark Vientos, why didn't he get the win?
Well, because I think even though we don't talk about it as much, goaltenders in hockey get wins and losses. Fair or not. Jonathan Quick recently won his 400th game. It was kind of a big deal. First American-born goalie to win 400. Goalies get wins and losses. You're not giving it to a defenseman. You're not giving it to Sidney Crosby. Same thing with a quarterback. Quarterbacks get wins and losses, and some of us look at that stat. So I think it's just you control the game in a greater way than everyone else, kind of like the goalie in hockey, the quarterback in the NFL, and a pitcher in baseball. So, no, I'm not getting funky enough to give the win to Francisco Lindor and make a brand new stat. I just want to kind of make it more of a decision on which pitcher gets the win versus the guy who happened to be on the mound when the team took the lead and eventually won the game.
I think to me, it's less about who gets the win. It's more about who gets the loss. Because there's so many times in a game where it's like, well, this guy clearly crapped the bed here.
Yeah.
He's the one that lost this game.
It's funny. Most of the time, I think the loss is straightforward. Like if you gave up the lead, if you allowed the run that allowed the other team to win, I think that's a loss. Now, there are exceptions. Like I'll give you a great example. Edwin Diaz comes into a game. The Mets lead 5-0. He gives up 5 runs in the 9th inning. Game then goes extra innings, and the relief pitcher allows the unearned ghost runner to score. He probably doesn't deserve the loss. So I think that's a great example where I'd hand the loss elsewhere. I do think more times than not, I'd say 90% of the time, the loss is going to be straightforward. But I'm fine with that. I think the official scorer should be able to make the decision on wins and losses. I like that.
Oh, and one more. Can we then change what a quality start is?
Yeah, I mean, we may have to anyway. You know what's funny about the quality start? I don't know if that stat ever took off. It's like holds. Holds and quality starts are two new age stats. I know we use it in our fantasy league, but I don't think it's ever really taken off where we care that much about it. Like, does anyone know who the holds leader was last year or the quality start leader was last year? No. I don't think we know it as much as we know the ERA leader or the saves leader. We talked on a recent Rico about an offseason acquisition deadline because obviously the MLB offseason drips very, very slowly. I threw out the idea. If you missed it, you can check out episode 422, I think it was. My idea was if you sign before a certain date, you're a tax-free ball player, which means your contract would not count against the luxury tax, which would incentivize the big market team to maybe spend earlier in the offseason. Sean James writes, Evan and Pete, what about signed by a certain date and no qualifying offer draft pick compensation is attached to you? This makes the player more valuable and less valuable after. That's also a really good idea. So guys like Alex Bregman, Pete Alonso, Corbin Burns, all the free agents that had draft pick attachments to it, instead of waiting past the deadline, you're probably better off signing earlier. Now, you could still risk it if you don't have the contract out there that you want, but you also have to realize that your value does take a little bit of a hit when teams have to give up picks. So I think that's a fair idea too. I think attacking the trade deadline, the acquisition offseason deadline is certainly a noble idea because I think baseball realizes that they don't have the same awesome offseason the way the NFL does and the NBA does. And they want to be awesome. Like, why don't you? You want to have an electric offseason. You want to have a week of time in which eyeballs are all over your network because we want to see what happens next. And you can't do that because you have a period of time starting in, let's say mid-November, really, when trades and signings start to go down, mid-November until like March, where prominent players are being moved. David's got an idea. He's got a change for the MLB. It's an allowance of altercations. Boy, Phil Mushnick's going to love this one. Big fan and looking forward to the season. I like the idea of a tax deadline to incentivize buying players before December 1st. But what do you think about MLB reducing suspensions and penalties for altercations, player to player and manager to umpire? I find everyone in the MLB to be too friendly, even when there's something on the line. I don't want to see anyone get hurt, but the occasional charging of the mound, trash talk, and or manager kicking dirt on an umpire is entertaining. What if the MLB said, hey, no more fines and max 1 game suspension? Hockey players get a 5-minute penalty, and I've never seen an MLB fight end as bad as one of those fights. Bryce Harper punches look more like slaps, yet still entertaining. Do you think this could drive up entertainment viewership? And do you see any subtle winks that MLB could institute? I give you credit, Dave. It's a very creative idea. I do not think in this day and age MLB wants to incentivize fighting. Now, do I agree with you that the rare baseball fight is wildly entertaining? Yeah, but I think the reason it's entertaining is because it's rare. The hockey fights are not entertaining. They happen all the time. They're pre-organized sometimes. They're choreographed. Like, I don't think we make a big deal about NHL fights very often because they happen all the time. So, no, I think you just have to let it be. One thing that you sort of touched on is the umpire arguments with the managers. They're going away. And they've started to go away because of instant replay. But once we get the robo ump, which we should discuss because that's certainly one of the major changes coming to Major League Baseball. It's dead. Like, how is Aaron Boone going to argue balls and strikes when it's a computer? When the computer is telling you if it was a ball or strike, what are you going to do? I mean, you're going to rip the little thing off the umpire's hand, throw it down, and say, you're wrong. So I think we are facing a day. You can think, unfortunately, I think fortunately, because we're getting the calls right, where that old school umpire-manager fight is going away. Now, speaking of the robo ump, let's talk about it. This spring training, it's happening right now. They are testing out the challenge system when it comes to balls and strikes. So the way this works, I've seen some highlights of it in the minor leagues, is that instantly as a batter or as a catcher pitcher, you can challenge the ball or strike. And it's going to take like 15 seconds. Like, it's very, very quick for the umpire to confirm the call or say, no, you're wrong. My question, because obviously I want to see this, I think we all want to see this, is if you've got a system that is so quick that we now can have challenges on balls and strikes, why not just make all balls and strikes done by the computer? If there's a technological issue, then I would say eventually we'll get there. It may not be ready in 2026 or 2027, but do we start with the instant replay thing, which I have no problem with? We want to get the calls right, and if it's not going to take up a lot of time, I don't think there's an issue here. Plus, we've already cut down 15 minutes off the game. If we've got to add 2 or 3 minutes to get balls and strikes right, I got no problem with that. We've already made the games really, really quick. But what I wonder about with the robo ump is I'd go all the way with it as opposed to just having it be a challenge system. But that is something to keep an eye on throughout spring training. Another big idea that I have in changes for Major League Baseball is one I'm very passionate about and one that I'm hopeful will occur once we expand. MLB will inevitably expand from 30 to 32 teams. We've gone a very long time without expansion. 1998 was the last time. That was when the Arizona Diamondbacks and the Tampa Bay Devil Rays came into the sport. Think about how long ago that was. I mean, I'm trying to think throughout expansion's history. I think that is the longest period of time, actually by a lot, that MLB has gone without expanding since it initially expanded in 1961 with the new Washington Senators and the Los Angeles Angels. And then obviously the Mets and the Colt 45s in 62. And then the Expos and the Padres in 69. And then the Mariners and the Blue Jays. And then eventually the Marlins and the Rockies. And then obviously Arizona and Tampa Bay. So we're headed there. And Rob Manfred has said once the stadium situations are settled with the Oakland A's and Tampa Bay Rays, we'll get there. The A's situation is supposedly settled once they build that stadium in Vegas. The Rays are still trying to figure out their stadium situation. So we may have to wait a little bit of time, but we're getting close to those situations being settled. And then I think we're looking at expansion. Nashville is likely. The other city I'm not sure about, do they go back to Montreal? Do they go up to Portland? Do they go to New Orleans? I'm not sure. The one I feel good about is Nashville. But here's what I want once we get to 32. Hear me out on this. I want to get rid of the tiny divisions. I don't like the tiny divisions. I don't like them in the NFL, though I understand why. I don't like them in baseball. I want 8-team divisions. So if we're at 32, we got 8 in the NL, 8 in the NL East, 8 NL West, 8 AL East, 8 AL West. And notice I said AL and NL. I do not want to get rid of the leagues. There are many out there that do, that are drawn in by the idea of the Mets and the Yankees and the Red Sox and the Phillies all being in the same division. I'm against that. So what I would do is 8 teams in the National League East. Maybe we go back to the way it used to be. Maybe the Cubs and the Cardinals come home and the Pirates come home from back in the day. So however you want to line it up in terms of geography, it's 8, 8, 8, 8. Okay? The schedule, very simple. You play the teams in your division 12 times. Decent amount of games, very similar to what you have right now. So 7 teams in your division, not named you. You play them 12 times. That's 84 games. Okay? The other division, which has 8 teams, you have a home and home with. That's 48 games. That leaves you 30 games left on the season. You play a division in the other league 3 times. So we get rid of playing everybody every year. It's once every other year. And so let's say in the first year of this, the Mets will play 3 games against each team of the 8 in the American League East. Bang, boom. we have a 154 game schedule or somewhere around there, because I'd cut from 162 to 154. I don't have a problem with that. So that's my realignment right off the top. Now, the next question is, what about the playoffs? Here's what I want. This is the real reason I love this. If you win the division, you're in the divisional series, period, stop. You want to call it a first round bye? I call it you're in the divisional series. The second place team and the third place team in each division has a wild card series. Very simple. Number 2 versus number 3. So let's say the Braves win the NL East and it's the Mets 2, Phillies 3. Great. Best of 5. I'll even move it to 5. Best of 5 divisional series. The winner of each of those wild card series, they're all wild cards, will face one of the division winners. We could even reverse it or make it lowest record versus highest record. So it doesn't always have to be the NL East division winner versus the NL East wild card series winner. We can reverse it based on record. But then when we get to the next round, also best of 5, every single game, all 5, is located in the division winner's stadium. So that's the distinct advantage we are giving to the division winner. So if you win your division, not only are you automatically in the divisional series, you are guaranteed every home game in the following round. Obviously, once you get to the LCS, whether it's a wild card team or a division winner, all bets are off. Then it's your normal 2-3-2 format. You like that one? That's my big realignment idea. We've got a nice 8-team division, creates new rivalries, which is kind of cool. Maybe brings back some old rivalries we haven't had in a while. You win the division, there's a clear reward. We don't have that right now because the third division winner doesn't get any reward. Just ask the Milwaukee Brewers. Great, best of 3. There's more likely to be a fluke in a best of 3, even though you have all 3 games in your own building. In this case, it's all wild card teams playing each other, and it's whatever. It's best of 5. You want to keep it best of 3, fine. I'm trying to, help MLB get some more revenue. So that's how I would format my new alignment, my new divisions, and my new playoff format, because I really want to reward division winners, and I don't think our current format does that. So your thoughts out there on my realignment idea, because I know there's a lot of people out there that really want to screw the leagues and say, forget it. Let's have the Mets versus the Yankees. Let's just put everybody in the same division. I know that there's a really good chance that's inevitably going to happen. They've already stripped away enough differences between the leagues where when you pitch this to us, you could say there's no difference between the leagues. So why does it matter? To me, it's still history. And it's still the idea of Mets-Yankees in the World Series is more special than Mets-Yankees in a wild card series or a divisional series.
No, I was about to say the same thing too, because to me, you have to highlight those games. It's a bigger deal when it's on those stages. If it's a regular occurrence, it's not as big of a deal. Yeah, you'll have it locally, but nationally, you're trying to make the sport grow. Are you? Are you trying to make the Super Bowl, for example? I'm not trying to make this about it to compare sports, but Chiefs, Eagles. I hate the Super Bowl, but the argument is they're the 2 best teams in the league, right? You want to see these 2 teams go head to head. They're having this rivalry that the Eagles, Chiefs have already played once before. Mets and Yankees, they've had the rivalry before, and we haven't watered it down. So if you were to take that World Series away and just throw it in the regular season and maybe they knock each other out in a divisional game, it's like hockey. Like I want the Rangers Devils to be like the Eastern Conference Finals. I don't want it to be the wild card round. That's stupid.
I agree. I think that realignment is years away because, like I said, they got to get the stadium deals figured out in Tampa. The Vegas thing has to actually happen, and then they got to expand to 32. And then once they do that, that would be the way I would institute it. But I love the idea of 8-team divisions, more rivalries. I mean, right now, I don't love the 5-team divisions. I never have. Or in the NFL, the 4-team divisions. I think in the NFL, there's no other choice because you don't play enough games to have big divisions. But I think in baseball, you certainly can. Thoughts, disagreements, certainly let us know at thericob@gmail.com. thericob@gmail.com. We'll give you more information on our big Rico Brogna road trip. Hoff and I are headed to spring training on March 8th and 9th. More details as we get them. But we appreciate you listening, downloading, and subscribing to another edition of Rico Brogna.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Rico Brogna podcast. It's amazing, isn't it? Make sure you download it now to keep it on you at all times.